Chapter 1: The Flawed Map. Have you ever asked yourself, why am I always drawn to the same type of person, even when I know it will lead nowhere? Why do I treat the people who love me most in a way that I myself can't understand? If you've ever had these questions, know that it's not your fault. The problem isn't your personality or your destiny. The problem lies in the internal map you are using to navigate your relationships. And for so many of us, that map was drawn incorrectly from the very beginning by trauma, the invisible scars on the soul. Today, we aren't going to talk about earth-shattering events. We're going to talk about little t trauma, the repeated emotional wounds from childhood that have silently shaped how we treat others and how we choose our partners. Chapter 2: The 8 Manifestations of the Scars. Trauma doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't appear as a monster. It disguises itself as the behaviors we mistake for our personality. Here are the 8 most common manifestations. 1. People-pleasing. If you find it terrifying to say no, you apologize for things that aren't even your fault. You constantly strive to be nice and agreeable to avoid conflict at all costs. Then most likely, as a child, you learned that love was conditional. You were only safe and deemed worthy of love when you were good and didn't cause any trouble. This deep-seated fear of abandonment programmed you to believe that pleasing others was essential for your survival. How it affects your choice of partner? You become a magnet for selfish, narcissistic, or controlling individuals. They exploit your lack of boundaries, leaving you feeling utterly exhausted from constantly giving without receiving anything in return. Classic example: Cinderella. Think of the character from the classic fairy tale. Living in an emotionally abusive environment, she learned that her only path to safety was through service and conflict avoidance. She cleans, cooks, and endures humiliation. All of this is a survival strategy developed by a traumatized child, desperately trying to appease her abusers to simply keep the peace. But not everyone reacts by people-pleasing. Others build fortresses of extreme independence. They were taught that they couldn't truly rely on anyone. Like Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games, they shoulder everything alone and push away those who try to help. This defensive wall, ironically, often unconsciously attracts unreliable people, which in turn confirms the bitter belief that, in the end, the only person I can count on is myself. 2. An addiction to chaos. Manifestation. You feel bored in peaceful, stable relationships. You confuse drama, jealousy, and constant arguments with passion and intensity. The psychology behind it. If you grew up in an unstable or chaotic environment, your nervous system became wired for a state of high alert. Peace and predictability feel foreign and sometimes even frightening. You therefore unconsciously recreate the familiar chaos of your past because it's the only emotional baseline you know. How it affects your choice of partner? You are drawn into roller coaster relationships with partners who may be emotionally volatile, inconsistent, or unfaithful. This allows you to feel intensely alive, even if that feeling is rooted in suffering. Classic example: Harley Quinn and the Joker. Look at their classic toxic relationship. Why would a brilliant psychiatrist become enthralled with a psychopathic criminal? Because the Joker provides an environment of extreme chaos, defined by soaring highs of infatuation and devastating lows of abuse. To a soul already shaped by trauma, This intense drama is mistaken for passionate love, while stability is perceived as intolerably boring. 3. An overwhelming fear of abandonment. The root of much of this chaos often stems from one of the most primal human fears, the fear of abandonment. The psychology behind it. This is one of the deepest wounds, often created by being abandoned, either physically or emotionally, by a primary caregiver in childhood. This wound can leave you in a constant state of high alert, hypervigilance, always scanning your environment for signs of being left again. We can see a tragic illustration of this fear in the life of Hollywood icon Marilyn Monroe. Her unstable childhood, spent in a series of orphanages and foster homes, forged an adult woman who constantly needed reassurance and desperately clung to love. Tragically, this turned her relationships into a stage for reenacting the unbearable pain of her past. 4. Self-sabotaging happiness and emotional numbness. Sometimes, to avoid confronting unbearable pain, the brain chooses a more extreme solution: disconnection. This is emotional numbness. The psychology behind it. This response often stems from a deep-seated belief that you don't deserve happiness. A stable, loving relationship feels like a foreign and threatening territory. This fear becomes so overwhelming that you destroy the relationship first simply to prevent it from having the chance to destroy you. How it manifests. You might find a wonderful, caring partner, but then you unconsciously become the villain in your own story. You push them away, create conflict, or betray their trust, thereby reinforcing the tragic core belief that happiness is not for me. A fictional study, Don Draper. Look at the character of Don Draper from the acclaimed TV series Mad Men. On the surface, he is a brilliant, sophisticated, and impossibly cool creative director. But behind that carefully constructed facade is a deeply traumatized past. His real identity is Dick Wigman, a man born from extreme poverty and neglect. This emotional numbness is the psychological armor he wears daily to hide his true wounded self. He uses his work, alcohol, and a series of fleeting affairs as tools to escape the terrifying prospect of confronting his real feelings. 5. Relentless perfectionism and a harsh inner critic. Running parallel to that emotional numbness, and sometimes as a way to mask it, is the relentless pursuit of perfectionism driven by a harsh inner critic. You set impossibly high standards for yourself and others. You never feel good enough. There is a constant nagging voice in your head that criticizes and judges your every move. You learned early on that your worth was conditional and dependent on your achievements. Love wasn't something you were given freely. It was something that had to be earned through flawless performance. How it affects your choice of partner? You tend to choose partners who are also highly critical, which validates your inner critic, or you select partners whom you view as projects that need to be fixed and perfected by you. The late CEO of Apple serves as a powerful illustration. The trauma of being given up for adoption as a newborn is believed to have created an intense, lifelong drive to prove his worth and control his environment. His ruthless perfectionism resulted in world-changing products, but it also stemmed from that deep-seated scar and an inner critic that never fell silent. 6. Lack of boundaries. And finally, we come to the most subtle scar, the one that blurs the lines between me and them, a lack of personal boundaries. You take on other people's problems as if they were your own. You feel responsible for their happiness. You often can't tell where your feelings end and theirs begin. Basically, you likely grew up in an environment where personal space and private emotions were disrespected or ignored. As a result, your sense of self became enmeshed with the people around you. This makes you easy prey for manipulators and so-called energy vampires, individuals who will drain you of your life force, knowing you won't be able to say no. A pop culture study, Bella Swan. Look at the character of Bella Swan from the Twilight series. Her entire world and sense of self practically merge with her vampire boyfriend Edward. She is willing to give up her family, friends, and even her mortal life for him, feeling that she literally can't live without him. This is an extreme depiction of a lack of boundaries, where one person's identity is completely dissolved into another. Chapter 3. Redrawing the Map. If you recognize yourself in one or more of the manifestations we've discussed, please do not panic. This is not a life sentence. It is a diagnosis, and once we have a diagnosis, we can begin to heal. The healing journey is not about finding a perfect person to patch up your broken pieces. The healing journey is about reparenting yourself. It means learning to give yourself the safety you never had. It means learning to set boundaries to protect your inner peace. It means learning to speak to your wounded inner child and say, "You are good enough. You deserve unconditional love, starting with love from me." When you heal your own scars, you no longer emit a frequency of lack. You emit a frequency of wholeness, and according to the law of attraction, wholeness attracts wholeness. Chapter 4. A Call to Action. Your past may explain why you are here today, but it has absolutely no right to decide where you will go tomorrow. That power is in your hands. Watching this video is the very first step on the journey of redrawing the map of your life, a map that leads to healthy, respectful, and peaceful relationships. If you were brave enough to see a part of your own story in this video, please leave a comment. You don't need to share any details. Simply write, "I am redrawing my map." That will be a powerful declaration to the universe and to yourself that your healing journey has officially begun.